Whew. Man, you know it's good when you're talking for 5 minutes before the episode starts, just to get everything rallied around it, man. It is time for another episode of the McKinney Podcast, folks, where we celebrate what makes us unique by nature as a city. And this is a special one-off recording. This is not a block like we normally do. We unfortunately had to reschedule with Scott. He had one too many speaking engagements a couple of weeks ago, and politely let us know, a day or so before recording, hey guys, I don't know if my voice is really up for an hour-long conversation in front of a professional microphone, which of course we understand. Yep. The politician's life for this short window of election season's beyond insane. So we're really glad to be able to sit here with, you're not representative anymore. I'm so used to calling you former representative and current mayoral candidate, Mr. Scott Sanford. I'm going to skip the music because
we need time.
We need time with this guy. Absolutely. So imagine the guest intro music is playing right now. Scott, your bio is what it is. You've served in Austin for a decade as a representative of what used to be District 70. Before that, you were a CPA, a small business owner. You're currently the executive pastor and in charge of operations and back office, and basically the effective CEO of Cottonwood. John Mark is the chairman of the board, and you're the CEO, basically. That's what it amounts to.
He would be an active chairman of the board.
Yeah, so. Definitely an active chairman. But that's basically, if you look at the resume, the bio of Scott Sanford, kids, 3 kids, right?
Two kids, 3 grandkids.
2 kids, 3 grandkids. Yeah, and you've been in and around McKinney for a long time. Right. So welcome, Scott Sanford.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right, Scott, so tell us, when your feet touched the face of the earth for the first time, where was that?
Carrollton. Well, Baylor Hospital in Dallas.
Okay.
Well, my feet probably didn't touch the floor.
Your parents probably carried you around.
That I know of.
A little bit, yeah.
Right.
So native Texan.
Yes.
Native Texan.
Yes.
And so we're going to say that Carrollton was your home base?
That's my birthplace, but grew up in Waco.
Okay.
And then Woodway, most of that, which is a little suburb of Waco.
Been there many times.
Have you?
Yeah. Wife went to Midway High School.
Oh, that's right.
In-laws were in Hewitt, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
Technically McGregor, but it was basically Hewitt.
Right.
On the south side of Waco. Right. So did you go to Baylor, or did you go to school somewhere else?
Went to Baylor. Met my wife there.
Sick and Bears.
Yeah,
there you go.
There we go.
Both of our basketball teams got eliminated, though, yesterday.
Yeah.
Girls and boys.
Yeah.
University of Florida still hanging in there.
Yeah, they are.
But by
chomp, baby.
Yeah, but by the time this was released, who knows?
The national champion will be known by the time this episode. No, it's not, because it's next Monday. This is one of the only times that we're recording and releasing as soon as possible.
That's right.
So this episode will drop a week from today.
That's right. So
because Bill Cox's episode dropped today, which is why I texted Scott yesterday, was like, hey, I understand short notice. Is there any way you can record tomorrow afternoon? And thank you, Scott, for accommodating our schedule. As you can imagine, getting 3, people that have other things going on in a studio at one time can be a little bit challenging sometimes.
That's right.
First thing I want to do before we jump into the political candidate stuff, your backstory is pretty significant. What is it about McKinney that brought you to this city where you chose to plant your flag here? McKinney is the most important city in District 70 that you represented for a decade in Austin. What is it about McKinney that drew you in, that caused you to say, you know what, I'm going to build a life here?
We were fairly young adults at the time, and we wanted to be closer to where I was working, which at the time was First Baptist Fairview, which became Cottonwood Creek Church. So we wanted to be closer there and be a part of the community that we were serving from the church perspective. And we loved the look and feel of the McKinney area. So we said, well, we could invest our lives here. Schools are good. Neighbors look like they would be really cool. Downtown wasn't that huge of an attraction at that point in time. But nonetheless, we liked the idea of a suburb. And at the time, El Dorado became a gravel road at Ridge.
How about that?
And
wow.
So we were almost in the country.
It's hard to imagine at this point.
Right. We were really close to being in the country, just probably a mile to, we were less than a mile to a gravel road.
Wow.
But it just seemed to have that chill vibe and family-friendly atmosphere that drew us to go ahead and invest up here.
That's funny because if you look at El Dorado right now, there's some parts of it that would almost resemble a gravel road.
Oh,
Given the,
I'm looking at that stretch between Ridge and Lake Forest. Yeah, it's a very challenging piece of road right there.
That's right. I can only imagine how exciting it is if you're on a motorcycle. That that's some pretty uneven surface.
It's only the westbound. Eastbound El Dorado is pretty good. It's that westbound stretch for those lanes. It's like, are they trying to make this difficult to drive on?
Maybe they're going for that nostalgia views, trying to bring it back to the gravel thing, right? So,
man.
But that's, if I remember correctly, that's nearly 40 years that you've lived here.
27 and a half years.
Oh, 30 years. Okay.
It's almost 40, Fred.
Yeah, well,
13-year difference.
We just round up the math.
Round up from 27 to 40.
Right. That's right. Yeah, so obviously I'm not remembering correctly, but still 3 decades worth here. So you've seen some changes. So, in terms of what you saw when you first decided to plant roots here in the area to now, what would you say has been the greatest benefit of that growth and probably the greatest challenge to that growth?
The most satisfying benefit is finding that the nature of the people was contagious. And when other people moved here, either like attracted like, or other people got rubbed off on in the right way, the friendly way. And as they moved in, they just became a part of the fabric and the culture. And plugged right into, you've heard me say, loving your neighbor is cool in McKinney, and just plugged right into that. So to be able to see growth while still having that person-to-person relationship building fabric of the community, I think is supremely cool and really satisfying.
So as we grow, and because you spent a good decade down in Austin, what would you say are things that we can do to prevent us from becoming like Austin?
Oh boy, or other cities
or
like
other
that
cities
who have seemed to have lost their soul. That would be my fear for McKinney. And so, was your question, what do you do about that?
Yes.
How do you prevent that growth out of control? Like beyond infrastructure, beyond reasonable city planning. Like I think anybody who's been to Austin in the last few years can agree. Wow, what a chaotic place to be.
Yes.
Like it's overrun with growth. And I think the folks, and one of your opponents, Dr. Matt Rastami, like his entire platform is no growth, no progress, which I have pretty strong differences philosophically with, which we cover in his episode. But yours is kind of moderated between two extremes. You're definitely in the middle between no growth, no progress, and someone who says, let's go, grow, baby, grow. You're a moderated version of that. You want to explain a little bit?
Well, I like grow, baby, grow, but at the same point, let's grow smart.
Yeah.
You don't want to throw out a bunch of seeds that you want to grow and harvest as a crop and not tend to them. So I think that's a fairly good analogy of what I'd like to see happen here, is that we continue to embrace the vitality of the new and the dynamism that's here and all the momentum that we have. And boy, guys, we've got lots of assets that we can leverage. When I say assets, it's of course it's downtown and it's other developments. It's some beautiful areas of the city. It's parks, but more than anything, it's the people and the talent of the people and their willingness to serve and to dedicate themselves to the community is our biggest asset to leverage. So to get back to your question, how do we not become Austin? Now, Austin, I think, is a whole different matter. They got to be a big city and began to bring in West Coast politics. However, where we are, I think it's more of a matter of our danger right now is that there is becoming a disconnected citizenry from its government. And if we don't reconnect them, I think that could really stop things in their tracks.
I want to get to your motivation for a little bit before we jump into last week's debate and get some more specific questions on issues. Because I want to spend most of our time helping people connect with you substantially in your views, your ideas, and whatnot. But you serve in Austin, and then you stopped serving. I believe it was 2022, right? Was when you stopped? You didn't run for re-election for the 22 cycle.
Right.
Okay. So since then, you've been all in on being a husband, a dad, a grandpa. What's your grandfather name?
Granddaddy.
Granddaddy. Okay. There you go. I love that question because it's such a personal thing. Like my kids have Papa and Pappy. You know, Chris Krause's grandpa name is Pappy. So shout out to Pappy. And I know you're listening to this episode, and man, we sure love you, man.
It's a good one.
Now, you're full on in Cottonwood and family and whatever you do in your free time. Why jump back into the politics game again? What was it about the mayor election at this time, in this city, that drew you out of political retirement, where you said, you know what, now's the time and I'm the man for the job?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that we absolutely love McKinney. We've been serving since the day we got here. Well, and at that point in time, when you're a really young family, you're serving in coaching soccer, which I knew nothing of whatsoever, coaching basketball, which I knew a little bit about, my wife serving in the PTA at Wolford Elementary, and me helping out when they had their fundraising walks and things of that nature. And then, of course, whatever we were doing at the church to serve the community as well, among other things. So I absolutely believe that we're to pray for the prosperity of our city, and that you're to love your neighbor. I think those are two biblical mandates. And as this point in history came up in time, and I saw that I felt like McKinney needed a certain leadership to get through this time. I'd like to call it a time of opportunity, but I also think it's a really critical time as well. And I looked over my skill set. And by the way, there was a prayer journey in all of this as well, that I don't want to take that for granted or leave that out. But looking at the landscape of McKinney and seeing where we were, I thought, I think that my background has equipped me to lead at this time, and had a conviction that I needed to step into that.
Okay. So, on the topic of faith, you serve at the church, but there are people out there, and, I went back and culled through some of the posts online, and, you've been accused of many things. One of them is, being a Christian nationalist. Yeah. Some sort of exclusionary.
There you go, baby. I see you asking the question I was leaning into.
How do you speak to the people who don't share your faith, that you're not going to run away with ideas that they think are just ludicrous or crazy? How do you appeal to everyone as the future mayor of McKinney?
You do that by, first of all, understanding that every person is created in the image of God, and since they are, they're due a level of respect, and I view them, as every person, as a treasured creation. And so therefore should be treated as such. I think you could see that play out both in my ministry at the church and in the community, but also in the legislature, where I had fantastic relationships from all types of people, believe me, all types of people from around the state as they represented their districts, and was able to relate to them and at times work with them. I grew as a person a great deal because of my interactions with people who are completely unlike me, with different outlooks, different perspectives, different public policy goals and aims. But we were able to build a relationship because of mutual respect, that whenever we did have the opportunity to work together, we loved those, we treasured those, and we were able to be effective in those. So I don't hold a bias against people. People are people. And if we're given the opportunity, you want to work with them. And if we can't quite get to a place where we can work together, I sure want to respect each other and have a constructive dialogue.
Mm-hmm. So along those same, you want a follow-up question there, or can I go?
No, go.
Along those same lines, when I was researching this to try to make sure we were able to give you an opportunity to have your own response to stuff that people say against you pretty regularly, you were a representative of a certain political party in Austin. You had red next to your name. You had a little R in parentheses next to your name. There are no political parties in municipal government. Nobody has an R or a D or an I next to their name. And I speak for myself as well as a lot of people that are concerned about the dangers of injecting partisan politics in a municipal position. A lot of folks are concerned that you are a pawn for the GOP establishment. at the local level that you will champion and advocate for the special interest things that are very important to people that have written big checks to support your campaign. What do you say to that in response?
Well, the first question I have is, how do you define GOP establishment? I think that would be a difficult thing to pin down, what that would be, because I don't know that I could at this point in time.
It is pretty fractured in 2025.
It is. It really is. And I really don't know if I got big checks from a whole lot of those political groups like that. But
Sure.
at the same point in time, I understand the question is that this municipal government is different than state government. It is, as you say, nonpartisan.
At least it's supposed to be.
It's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I think that you would also find that there were times when I had to debate those that were in my party, and I had no problem doing. Well, actually, it hurts a little more when you have to do that.
Yeah.
But I certainly did that.
Because when one party is in such strong death grip control of the legislature as far as committee assignments and bill co-sponsors and whether something gets out of committee goes to a floor vote, like the politics at the state level, like you have to be a team player or else you're going to have a lot of challenges getting your bills to advance. You have to worry about somebody primarying you from further out in the political extreme of whatever your party is. Those considerations don't really exist in municipal politics. How do you see yourself shifting gears out of having to play by a certain set of unwritten rules like you did in Austin for sure, versus you got 7 votes and all 7 of you have a very particular set of constituents and they all live in one particular geographic area. District 70 is a lot broader than just the city of McKinney, but as mayor of McKinney, you have a very specific set of stakeholders. How do you shift your tactical position to make things happen more effectively for a different group of stakeholders as mayor than you did as District 70 representative for a decade?
One of the things I intend to do is to make heroes of each district, each council person. By part of my platform is that we're going to listen, we're going to engage hard, and we're going to listen intently through listening sessions, town halls, whatever venues that we can, but face-to-face relationship building live and in person. So I will want to take that council person in that district into that as well and give them a significant piece of leadership there. I want to set them free to represent their districts. I want for them to have the ability and the freedom to think independently.
Yep.
And then to contribute their own unique skill set to the city. So I don't intend to build a kingdom. Hopefully we could build a majority when we need one, but we would do that on council by finding ways to work together, and where we find a consensus, man, we plow ahead.
So last question, then Fred's going to take us into more debate stuff and issues and whatnot. There's a big problem if you look at the map, of the district map and the way that everything plays out. In this District 1, and the last time the map was redrawn, District 1 picked up a whole bunch of stuff west of 75 and north of 380. Now where a lot of the painted tree development, the representation of the people that live east of 75 in less socioeconomic, affluent neighborhoods, Justin Beller's got a really hard job, perhaps the hardest job on council, because the extreme diversity that he has to deal with in District 1, he's got all of the folks that live east of 75. But he also has a lot of different neighborhoods, different socioeconomic perspective, different ethnicity, different everything that live north and west of there. Would you support increasing council to be 9 seats and having some sort of mixing up of the geography to better represent the people groups that live in certain parts of the city, as well as just from the basic math to work, adding a 3rd at-large seat?
Ooh. So with 2 different...
Nine seats on council.
Right.
District 1 to be reallocated to be the totality of folks that live on the east side of 75, because their interests and needs are pretty different from west of 75. I don't want to overly simplify things, but folks that live in Craig Ranch versus someone that lives at Custer and 380 have pretty homogeneous needs. Like the difference between those groups, you look at 2, 3, and 4 compared to the folks that live east of 75. It's more important that we protect the representation of the folks that live east of 75 because they're in the definite minority of the city's population. And I don't mean to make a play on words of people being ethnic minorities or anything like that, but I mean from a voting block perspective, when you think about representation, to me, it's really important that we make sure the people in District 1 have their voice represented and not diluted by folks that are also in District 1 that live in Painted Tree at Hardin and 380. So that's kind of where the calculus of my question is coming from of would you support moving council to be 9 seats instead of 7 to better have each district represent the constituents of that district?
This is the first time that question has been raised. It's a really intriguing idea, and I think it's worthy of consideration.
I'm sure I have to confess a certain amount of ignorance. I don't know exactly how often that process is allowed to happen from state law perspective. I imagine it's probably tied to census if I had to guess. Yeah. But yeah, so that's not something that you would tackle in your first term more than likely because census comes around in 2030. And I'm doing some basic math here. That's more than 4 years from now. Yeah. So that'd be something,
second term.
That'd be something that Mayor Scott Sanford handles in his second term.
That's right.
As mayor.
That's right.
Fred, you want to take us into the debate, man?
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and hit the really hot topic, the airport. Do you support its expansion, and what is your plan, or your ideal for how that goes?
The question always comes up. It's usually the first question anybody asks, whether it be a round table or what have you. And this is not the first time you've heard this, but when I have to ask, when I ask that question, why are we asking that question? Mm-hmm. And the reason that the best answer I got was from Pastor Charles Watley from East McKinney, and he said, because it's dividing our community. Why is it dividing? That makes it heartbreaking. And why is it dividing our community? It's because that a lot of people feel like council has not respected their vote on the bonds for the passenger terminal. They're sitting there going, technically, that's all we said, but you knew what we meant. We meant don't build the passenger terminal on our dime. So I called for, at the debate, a pause. I thought it'd be reasonable to say, hey, for the outgoing council and mayor to just say, let's just put a pause on this. Let the new mayor and new council look at the pro formas and the projections going forward, and then perhaps re-engage the voters with the new information. I became more concerned about it 2.5 weeks ago when we learned that once the passenger terminal is built, that will transition from a profitably operating airport to one that will sustain operating losses, and that those will be subsidized by taxpayers. So I would like to be able to dive deeper into the numbers and with the council, with the staff, and say, where is this really going? What is the investment that's really being asked of the taxpayers for years to come, including the cost of additional firefighters and additional police officers that will have to be there to serve the airport and with FAA regulations, of course. So that's where I am. I think.
So to be clear, would you support a ballot initiative asking the citizens of McKinney a straight up yes or no question? Do you support the expansion of creation of a passenger terminal at McKinney International Airport?
Yes. But I at the same point in time, one of the things we don't want to do as a council is to put ballots on the items on the ballot that we don't have a fairly clear idea of which way it's going to go.
Oh, I get it. Yeah. And council is vested with a certain amount of authority on making decisions the people elected them to make. We don't live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic. And those are two very, very different things. But
at the same time, another thing related to that is a lot of people have this idea that there is a good old boy network. And I'll just say it outright that a lot of people believe that Bill Cox is the representative for the good old boy network here in McKinney. But in many ways, I've heard a lot of people kind of lump you in there as well, that there's a good old boy network of, the people who are going to make decisions almost regardless of what people chime in about. And so how do you address those concerns that, you are or aren't part of that system, that, maybe you're just further down the line from Abbott and Ted Cruz and all the others?
I think you'd have a hard time with evidence tying me into any type of network that's running things. Today, here in McKinney, it does feel a little weird being on the outside of feeling like the outsider in the race.
Mm-hmm.
That does look, because I am friends with a lot of those who would be considered on the inside and in that network.
So you don't feel that your time in Austin has you tainted or jaded towards certain mindsets or certain projects or plans within McKinney itself?
Oh, no. As a matter of fact, for my sensitivity has probably been raised toward the nuances of public policy and how it affects individuals.
Okay. Now, so going back into the debate, and this is where we just keep it 100% real, man. We don't speak on behalf of anybody else. This is me and Fred, who happened to be on stage. We literally had the best seats in the house because we were on stage along with you and the other three candidates. And man, that was so much fun. I walked away from that. One, I was so glad it was over because there was a lot of preparation that went into that.
Yes, there was.
A lot of preparation. We agonized over those questions, like hours and hours and hours spent over. We curated 70 or 80 questions down to 7, and it was hard. That being said, like Fred and I had a front row seat to see how everything went out. So before either one of us share our opinions, how did you feel about the debate? Because I don't know if you've seen this yet or not. The debate video on our YouTube channel for the podcast, which, by the way, is the only place that anyone can see the video of the debate, it has more than 1,000 views since Thursday of last week. And that's, barely 3 full days since it was posted. It's obviously something people care a great deal about because, to my knowledge, that's the only time the 4 of you are actively challenging each other's ideas on stage together. You're going to have like forums and meet and greets and whatnot, but that's the only real time that there's going to be any actual debate of ideas on stage together. So how'd you feel it went?
I thought we did well. We certainly, I say we because it's a team effort.
You've got a team, yeah.
Yes. So certainly did a lot of preparation, a lot of study for that. And then I felt like we had the opportunity to connect with the audience and did so. And we're able to communicate our thoughts, our ideas in a positive fashion, and our desire to connect and lead. So I felt pretty decent about it. And of course, you got lots of positive feedback. You've always got to be leery of your friends' feedback, of course, and your team's feedback. Mm-hmm. But I felt good.
Okay, so without a doubt, at this stage in the race, it looks to be that really the 2 primary candidates in this race are you and Bill Cox. So, what would you say is the reason why people need to consider throwing the lever for Scott Sanford over Bill?
I think if you look at the broad experience, exposure that I've had, it's been in small business. So I certainly have an appreciation for what it takes to start and run a small business and hurdles that government throws in the way to make that possible. And it makes me appreciate the efforts of McKinney and the McKinney Chamber to incubate, if you will, and to help network small business people together so that they can grow their businesses. So I really do enjoy that. But back to my experience as a CPA, and of course, so I see things with numbers. But then, of course, in ministry, I've had a bit exposure to every single. I can't think of a business component that I haven't been able to see and have purview over. Doesn't mean I'm an expert in them, but at least have purview over and learn from. So then ministry helps me to see things from a people perspective. So I see numbers, and I see people, and I see a whole lot of that coming together. You see that in the livelihoods of people, and that's where you get to property taxes, keeping property taxes low, keeping your town affordable, reducing the retail sales tax leakage that we have so that perhaps our city could prosper more with sales taxes staying local, and again, with the opportunity to have an impact on property taxes. So with that broad exposure, I think, with no conflicts of interest, I only wish I had enough money to have conflicts of interest, but I don't. that would give me an objective leadership style.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you brought up a point there that our community, there seems to be a wider gap happening between the haves and the have-nots, specifically with homelessness on the rise and the cost of actually living here in McKinney.
And apartment renters.
Yes. So what do you do with this mishmash of ingredients that, property values going up, taxes going up, living here is getting to be more of a challenge? And, because we talked about it earlier, how do we not become Austin and all these other things? What is your long range view for managing all of that?
And by long range, he means about the next 4 to 8 years, somewhere in that space.
kind of a two-term thing.
Well, we need to bring back into balance the whole multifamily versus single family versus commercial development. Between 2012 and 2021, apartment units increased 111%, more than doubled. At the same time, population increased only 35%. So you can see it's out of balance. If you look today or at least late last week at the McKinney website, you see that there are $800 million worth of multi-unit permits that are active and only $400 million worth of single-family permits that are active. So the imbalance doesn't seem to have abated its momentum. I think to have a good mix, then we need to have a good balance between multifamily and single family and bring that back into
As mayor, how would you do that specifically? Because we had a question in the debate about attainable housing, and all 4 candidates gave what I thought was a pretty decent answer. Different flavors, different ideas. Expand on that. How would you, as mayor, help bring that back into balance, as you say?
You would have to make a decision, first of all, and have some backbone behind the decision. And you would have to look at your commercial and plan development, look back to the 2040 plan that McKinney has, and begin to vigorously honor that plan. We've seen other communities around that have had a plan and have stuck to it, and they've reaped the benefits over the last several decades of staying with that plan. And I believe we could do the same thing. I don't think it's too late. We have enough green space still along 121 and others that will be developing to do that. But if we don't, we end up with this mishmash, this hodgepodge. So the first thing you do is to make a commitment that if it's zone commercial or PD, planned development, you leave it that way, or even light industrial. But you don't flip it to multifamily, regardless of the developers how much they're willing to invest in it. So because that it's just going to be best for the community. Then you also look at the multifamily zoned areas and say, should we change those zones to commercial?
So let me get all the way in the weeds for a second.
Oh boy,
your main opponent has served as chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission in McKinney.
Right.
Any specific actions that you see that board doing, or perhaps Bill Cox advocating for or actively participating in, that you wants to say, I don't know about that. Like as mayor, I would want to revisit XYZ. Anything stand out to you? Because this is literally a conflict of ideas at this point. I don't want to rule out Dr. Matt Rastami. I don't want to rule out Taylor Willingham, because the voters have their say. Let's be clear. I was completely out of line, and when I explicitly called Dr. Matt Rastami, I said, you're not a serious candidate. And I was wrong. And in his recording, I completely clearly apologized to him for speaking on behalf of the voters in a way that is not my place. I don't want to discount that. That being said, from all the polling that I've seen and all the stuff that it happens around town that I'm aware of, it's a conflict of ideas between you and Bill Cox. I don't want to say it's officially a 2-person race, but it sure seems like we're headed for a runoff between you and Bill Cox, because the top 2 candidates, if nobody gets 51% or 50% plus 1, then we're going to a runoff, and the other 2 candidates, thanks for playing. But this is not your cycle, and look forward to seeing you run again at some point in the future. If that's the case, the ideas, the behaviors, the vision between you and Bill Cox is going to be the most important thing that will decide this race, other than voter turnout, which we all know is going to be incredibly important. That commentary to say Is there anything that Bill has done as chair of the P&Z that you would want to revisit as mayor? You just mentioned keeping commercial and PD zoning as is and looking at perhaps taking something that's currently multifamily zoned and rezone it to protect that housing density for the future. Thoughts on that?
Well, every vote that was taken in the last last at least 12 years, of course, you're asking about his tenure, though.
Specifically talking about your opponent for this mayor election.
Yeah.
I'm trying to draw some contrast between the way that Scott would operate as mayor versus the way that Bill would operate as mayor.
Well, where did he vote no on a multifamily deal? He had the opportunity to vote no or to probably not proceed on lots of different multifamily developments, and I certainly wouldn't have championed that. Nor would have I would have looked for an opportunity as well on the airport to slow things down.
You gotta love short, succinct answers. As a podcast host, it doesn't leave room for misquoting.
That's right.
It doesn't. There's no context needed for that answer. That's a complete answer. I respect that.
All right. So now, do you feel that McKinney is trying to keep up with the Joneses in terms of we're getting a big wave pool water park? Allen's got their thing coming along.
Frisco.
Frisco has,
boo Frisco.
But there was a time I remember not long after we moved here when they announced the development of the Star. And someone said, well, McKinney could have had something like that. McKinney could have had something like Toyota Stadium. But, now we've got the MISD Stadium. We've got the amphitheater coming in. We've got our water park. We've got our District 121. They've got their Hub 121. Do you see an end in sight for McKinney? What I believe a lot of people are saying, keeping up with the Joneses, and is that something that we need? Is that something that we shouldn't have?
I hadn't thought about it in that context, Fred. I've thought about it in the context of I certainly don't disparage them for trying to attract businesses that charge sales taxes that might draw people from other communities here, because we're certainly going to Allen and Plano and Frisco with our sales tax dollars. Why not have venues and opportunities for them to come to McKinney with their sales tax dollars? So and not to mention the property values that could, if the deals don't mess it up, benefit the property taxpayers in McKinney.
Okay.
That's another short, succinct answer.
My question was 10 times longer than
he has done that a few times in this episode. My lead-in was about 12 times longer than his answer. Now, Scott, one of the things that one of your opponents has said is basically, as mayor, he doesn't see it as his job to be championing us competing with our regional colleagues, our sister cities, if you will. That EDC and CDC, their role should not be to incentivize and attract and cheerlead businesses coming to McKinney, developers bringing their big projects to McKinney, like the Sunset Amphitheater, like the Lagoon Resort thing and whatnot. What's your view philosophically as mayor? Is it your job as mayor to be a champion of the city's image with developers and to be there as a cheerleader and helping EDC and CDC draw these sort of lifestyle projects to our city and compete with other cities in the region and other cities across the country of our similar size, whether it's, Orange, California, or pick another suburb that's next to a very large city, one of the 200,000 citizen suburbs of Chicago, for instance, where we're competing with other regional players for this kind of large corporate investment that then diversifies our tax base, relieves pressure on the residential property taxes and whatnot. How do you view your role as mayor as that cheerleader and recruiter in chief of sorts?
As exactly that. Would love the opportunity to attract businesses to McKinney and to be that cheerleader, to be that magnet that draws the top leaders of McKinney to meet with the business target, if you will. You mentioned people, other cities in the area. Are we competing against them? Are we aligned with them? And the answer is yes.
Yeah, it's both.
It is both.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we're going to fight like crazy against one another once in a while, and then other times we're going to band together and we're going to go to work as well.
Okay, so along that, you recently got called out on socials for making decisions against our community. And I know that you gave a rebuttal online as well.
A really good rebuttal, I might add. That was on target.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance. I didn't get a chance to see your response to that. But how do you address those concerns that people say, "Well, he's really not for us"?
It's really easy if you're not talking to an elected official. It is super easy. Say, I work to save you money. I work to help preserve your property rights, and explain it to them. It's easy. It's only the elected officials who are concerned about the power, if you will. Money is power in government, and they were more concerned with that than they were, in my view, the individual citizens, and that have a problem with it.
So let me just double click on this for a little bit, and I want to be totally transparent. I have, in the last year, I've come to enjoy a good, friendly relationship with George Fuller. I wouldn't say he's a friend. I haven't earned that. He probably has a lot of people that want to say he's their friend. I will say that we have good rapport and we have mutual respect. And I totally get where he's coming from with these concerns. I see both sides of the coin, honestly. You have a great point, and George also had a point in the video that he made. How would you suggest that cities, in the wake of Senate Bill 6, with annexation being much more complicated after Senate Bill 6, how do we as a city better engage with citizens that are currently living in an extraterritorial jurisdiction, or ETJ? When we have these conversations just in the last few weeks with the county about setting up an emergency district, ED1 and ED2 and whatnot, so people that live in an ETJ can still access emergency services and pay some sort of taxation for it, because the city police, the city fire is paying for fire trucks and police officers and stations and whatnot. How would you advocate for the city having a good workaround to be able to annex as makes sense as the city continues to grow? Because if you look at a map, man, it's a whole bunch of Swiss cheese north of 380. It's from a city planning perspective.
It's
Paul Grimes, not Scott Grimes. Sorry, Paul Grimes has a really hard job as city manager because things are very complex north of 380. How in the world would you see getting around that?
I'd work with Paul on that, and I totally acknowledge the Swiss cheese type of look that you have there and the challenges that brings to infrastructure planning. And, how do you get from A to B? Do you go with a thought process of, we're going to change this someday, it's going to change someday? Or do you go with, okay, this is what it is, this is what McKinney is, and then we're going to plan accordingly? It's going to take a lot of work, James. It's going to be council, staff, myself, and Paul looking at this and say, how do we develop our strategy on this? And I can't tell you that I have the answer today at all, because it is taking a lot of work. I know they're spending a lot of time on it right now, and they're concerned about it. And I'll join the fray and get in there and get our hands dirty and see what we come up with.
So if the fine folks of McKinney, choose.
Let me back up real quickly.
He's got a longer answer, Fred.
Yeah,
You see
well,
this?
I missed a point, though, that when we do that work, the focus of in our minds of who we're doing it for is the current residents of McKinney.
Yeah,
we need to make sure that we don't overextend ourselves financially in trying to be a good neighbor to people in the ETJ or outside with emergency services.
And that's honestly my biggest concern, right, as a current citizen of the city of McKinney and not the ETJ. To me, it's fundamentally unfair for people that are not contributing to the city resources as the citizens are, from public school tax, from the Collin College tax. Those people aren't paying into the city coffers. I have a real problem with them enjoying the benefits of being a citizen of McKinney without paying taxes like a citizen of McKinney. It's a complex issue.
It is. And I think the thing that will end up driving the solution is the emergency services.
Yeah.
I just have a hunch that that's going to be the fulcrum that swings.
And that's why it's such a complicated issue, because no rational, kind-hearted fellow citizen could ever say, you know what, I want that neighbor over there to not have access to the police department. I want that when that person's house is on fire, I want them to be stuck using a volunteer fire department. As a good neighbor, I cannot, in good faith, as a Christian, as someone who loves Jesus and tries to live by the Bible, I have a really hard time saying, you know what, we should withhold emergency services to those people.
Right.
But at the same time, there's realities of city budgets that have to be taken into account, and those PDs and FDs are real expensive.
Yeah,
yes, they are.
Yeah, but I think you touched on something that no one else has, is that you're concerned about the citizens today. Everybody talks in that future, 20 years down the road, we're going to have this, we're going to have that, and that's great for them. But for right now, it was actually an update that the McKinney Chamber put on. I mean, it was over a year ago, but there were constituents from the East Side who were saying things like, you're building all these things, but there's nothing here for our current families. And of course they harkened back to, when we were growing up, we would go to the skating rink, but, we'd have to go to Plano, or we want to do this and we'd have to go to Frisco. And so, they were really concerned about what are we doing for us here right now, within the next 1, 2, 3 years, not 20, 30 years down the road. So, if the citizenry of McKinney say, you know what, we want Scott Sanford as our mayor, and let's go ahead and say, they choose for a full consecutive terms back to back. What do you want your legacy to be?
I would want it to be that there was such trust built between the people and City Hall that communication became fluid, and that buy-in became high, that momentum was sustained and grown, and that no one felt disrespected, and everybody felt like they at least were heard with their views, and that McKinney would be a place that we're not all going to be on the same page, but we could all be on the same page.
Yeah.
As far as how we feel about McKinney, how we feel about our neighbors, and are we functional or not, and do other people want to come here? I think that's what we'd like to leave behind.
Excellent.
This is probably a little too personal. We talked about this before. Going into this election cycle, I have friends that are on council. I was in Leadership McKinney class of 2020 with Dr. Dre Feltus. Michael Jones I consider a friend because of the McKinney Cares stuff. Don't really know Charlie. Haven't ever had the opportunity to get close with him. When I look at the other folks on council, Patrick Cloutier I consider a mentor and a friend. Just a real quality human. You look at the folks who are currently on council, there's a lot of momentum in favor of Bill Cox. Going back to, before, November is the first time that I heard, I hear, Bill Cox, the commercial real estate guy? Like, yeah, I hear, he might be, invited to run by people that think about these things. I came into this election cycle with a bias in favor of Bill Cox before anybody else came in the race. And I'll openly say it. Going into it, I thought, well, man, Bill Cox is a really strong candidate. Look at his body of work in the last 30 years. He's already been on council. He's already done mayor pro tem. He's already done, P&Z. And as the debate played out, as, in this conversation, even, it's a great example, Scott, you did really well in that debate. And in my own personal opinion, I can't speak for anybody else. I think your main competition was lacking energy that night. I don't think he answered some of the questions in ways that I've seen him answer them better before. I've seen Bill a lot sharper and a lot more on point than he was Tuesday a week ago, which, as someone who is leaning his way, I found to be disappointing, honestly. I was like, golly, like, Bill, baby, what are you doing? I've seen you be way better than this. I'm sitting here as we record this on what is today, the 24th? The 24th of March. I'm still leaning Bill Cox, but man, I'm telling you, like, a vote for Scott Sanford, that's not a problem for me. McKinney, the citizens of McKinney have a real challenge on their hands because Bill's a good man. I know he means well, and as mayor, I think Bill would do a good job as mayor. I know you mean well as mayor. Pretty sure you do a good job as mayor. This is not a choice that people have between a bad choice and a good choice, or an evil choice and a beneficial choice. It's really just a matter of whose vision do you like better? whose ideas more resonate with your own opinions, voter. And if it's Dr. Matt Rastami, if it's Taylor Willingham, then by all means, vote for one of those guys and good luck. And let's see what happens. But Fred, I know you're leaning Scott Sanford, and that's totally fine. It's an odd place for me to be, Scott, because you're the executive pastor of the church that my wife and I are super plugged into. Man, we love Cottonwood. It's an amazing place to be. Our kids are thriving there. It's a weird spot for me as a co-host of a podcast. As a human, I'm not unbiased. I have my own opinions and thoughts and feelings, just like Fred does, and every other voter out there. So all that to say, bravo, man. You're doing well for yourself, and I think the citizens of McKinney have a really hard choice to make between two good options on May 3rd.
They do. What would you for the person who's on the fence, what is that deciding thing that you would say, this is why you vote Scott Sanford?
I hope that people would recognize a true heart and leadership in me and in our team, that we intend to do things differently, and we intend to connect with people and open up those communication channels. And I believe the best governance will happen when we have the best minds and the best talent in our city connected, working, on board and moving forward. So I think that my leadership style is one of engaging and one of empowering. So I think that could be the thing that would get them off the fence and leaning my direction, because we want to get to know you, we want to empower you, we want to include you, and let's go.
All right,
Fred, hit him with the lightning round, baby.
All righty, okay.
Hold
So
on a second. I'm going back right here, and there you go. There's the music.
All right,
we got one question, Scott.
Oh boy.
All right. So no wrong answer.
Now, is there a $100,000 pyramid behind me? Or
That's right. No phone a friend, no lifelines, no anything. Who would win in a fight between a polar bear and a great white shark? They're in a body of water 6 feet deep of infinite width. There's no shore, there's no edges, you can't get out of the water. But in that fight between the polar bear and the great white shark, who wins?
I would go with the great white shark.
Oh, why is that?
Well, the shark is always in the water, and the polar bear isn't always in the water. And I'm just envisioning that the shark is larger than the polar bear. Great white is larger, with bigger jaws.
It's the natural habitat argument.
Right.
Okay.
But
if it was a Baylor bear.
Oh, it's the perfect
It's
end.
a whole different story.
So the episode notes on description on YouTube, show notes on all the platforms is going to have Scott's campaign information. You can learn more about there. You can donate or volunteer if that's your thing. Scott Sanford, really appreciate you making time to be here today, man. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you guys. It's been a lot of fun.
And hey,
Appreciate it.
voting, early voting starts April 22nd. That's Monday, April 22nd. You can check your voter registration details on the state website.
That's right. And we want to encourage people, listen, turn up and vote.
You got to show up.
Turn up and vote.
None of these episodes mean a dang thing if you don't show up at the polls.
That's right.
Hey, George was elected last time against Tom Meredith with the total number of votes cast between all of the candidates was less than 20% of the eligible votes.
That's right.
In our city. That is unconscionably bad, folks. Let's not let that happen again. Get out there and vote.
That's right.
That's it. That's the episode. See you next time.